Hello. This afternoon, I posted linked on a post on LinkedIn talking about today the Fort Hood revealed the investigation results this morning, and I thought I want to add a little more clarity to the post that I gave because I want to get some insight from Veterans Council and veterans. So, one of the tenets of Veterans Council and veterans, we provide advocacy for military sexual trauma survivors, and so I thought it was important that we would sit there and make some comments on what just transpired today. And so, how you doing? My name is Tony Williams. I'm the CEO and president for Veterans Council and Veterans. And I want to provide some things real quick that I think what I consider some takeaways, some key takeaways from this afternoon's press conference, led by the Secretary of Army McCarthy. I first want to give great thanks to the investigators who came here. All of them were have already been in the military, had lots of military experience, and took the time out to actually do this investigation. It's very critical. Insight and highlight some of the things we need to do as far as the veterans. I want to, I know there's a Kerry Ricci was part of uh, this investigation. Daquita Rodriguez was also part of this. John Harmon, Jack White, and then led by Chris Wecker from the FBI. So thank you for doing your job. From a personal point of view, for me, first of all, I did 24 years in the Army, and I was born in Fort Hood, so that's one thing. I also commanded headquarters company U.S. Army Garrison and 3 Corps in Fort Hood, so I had a personal stake in what was being said and going on with this whole investigation. So I want to talk about some takeaways that I thought were that are very important. One of the biggest takeaways is I saw in that report, it's a 136-page report that you can get online. I have it in my post. You can go and click it and read it, please. But one of the takeaways is that the SHARP program, the Sexual Harassment and Assault Response Program, was considered very inadequate, was not resourced, and was poorly structured. So that I thought was a big indictment on the SHARP program for the Fort Hood Post. Another indictment I also saw was the leadership. The leadership climate was terrible, and that I already saw in the paper that 14 senior leaders were relieved, from sergeant majors to generals and on, that were relieved from this. And so that was significant because sometimes you cannot leave from the headquarters. And so what they're mentioning today, what the secretary said, mentioned about no one looked beyond the headquarters policy. So you put a policy out, and only one that really the headquarters cared about was going on with them, and not going out there and seeing if it's being followed. Particularly some of the policies I saw that really wasn't resonate beyond the brigade. So it's another thing to brigade and on. So that was a really big takeaway. Another big takeaway I thought was very important was that the CID, the criminal development in Fort Hood, and the other ones that really investigate sexual assaults. Harassment is normally the chain of command deals with that, but the assaults are investigated. And they said it were poorly resourced. That there's a very high turnover rate. So those poorly resourced, and they say poorly resourced, they're talking about they didn't even have the technology to track cell phones and the texts and stuff on that. They didn't have the training experience. They weren't really credentialed. So a lot of the people part of the criminal investigation that has been weren't even credentialed. They were probably lower ranking, weren't experienced, and that's really you're only going to be as good as your investigators. And so that's really an indictment on the Fort Hood, but also whoever assigned them. So I hope that's not the same case. The other SHARP programs and CID programs in each post that they have to be resourced. Another thing I thought was important was the delay of getting any kind of answers. They said it took over a year, and they said part of that could have been because of the poorly resourced SHARP and CID. So that's something because if you don't feel like nothing's happening, then you really stop complaining. That's key. One of the things that Carrie Ricci mentioned that when she spoke was that the survivors knew that she believed them. You have to have a bit of trust in them, and Carrie definitely you can tell the emotions on her that she really cared about what they thought, and that was important that they feel like that they're being listened to, and maybe not always believe, but just at least listen to, because there are always two sides, okay, but at least they need to be listened to. I also noticed that with Ms. Rodriguez, when she was talking about her interviews, how 503 of the participants were female, and how half of the sexual assaults that were talked about, only half of them were actually reported, and that's kind of endemic as well. One of the things I thought was important that Jack White mentioned was he had said that the culture. and there's a many cultures. There's lots of cultures when you talk about that. So especially when you're stateside, there's a culture of the military. There's a culture of the community that's surrounding you. There's a culture where you're coming from, and that's a really big thing. We have to really push and push and push on the cultures. There is a big, and that's one of the biggest, the only really biggest criticism I had. Well, two big criticisms I have the support. One of them that the people who did get the investigation, they were a couple generations removed from what's going on right now. So I think you may have gotten more and maybe more input for younger generation that they can talk to and you can believe them. So that's one of my biggest. If you say anything criticism, that you could have had one or two people who were a little bit more in that age demographics of who you're investigating. So I think that's important that you don't get it, because I remember John Harmon mentioned about sergeant's time, and anybody know about sergeant's time? That's something that the military and the Army specifically dictates. Once a week, you got to sit there and you got to provide training to your soldiers. I think they need to sit there and get beyond just training, but also the families, because one of the big takeaways that the NCOs did not know their soldiers that well, and they did it through time. They didn't have enough time or whatever, but you got to have time. NCOs, you got to make time out to know your soldiers, to know what they're doing, know what their concerns are. You got to get a chance to know them, and we got to make a way that they can do that, and not just counting the sergeant's time. What are you training on? But do you care about the families as well? That was a big takeaway, as far as that the NCOs felt like they didn't have enough time, time to really to know much about the families and stuff. So that's the key thing. I thought what was another important comment that was made by Chris was about Schwecker, about suicides, a very high rate of suicide and addictions and stuff. So there's a lot more of the problems going on in Fort Hood than just that. But there's also some other things, cultural things, again, like Jack is talking about, the suicide, high rate of suicide. That one sergeant died by suicide early on in the day that died by suicide when he was being sexually harassed. He was male. And I want to think, even though the majority of the people who they interviewed were females, there are males also a victim as well. So don't forget about the males being survivors as well. So I think that's an important part. So again, don't just some cliff notes from me, because I'm really interested in that. This is what the things I'm really concerned and I'm really into. There are a lot of other organizations out there who are really strong advocates for military sexual trauma survivors. So I encourage you to Google and find out who they are. There are a tremendous amount out there. So please keep it going. We cannot let this be that's it. Put this in a shelf and walk away. We gotta keep it on, keep the heat on. That there's some follow through. That was mentioned. I think one of the things that Jack White mentioned, is about the comparison. We have to do comparisons. We have to see who's doing something right, who's doing something wrong. Not just the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and the Coast Guard. So check them out, see who's doing what they're doing, see if you got different programs. Because you do. You have some Air Force have SAPR, which is sexual assault program for response, and the Army's got SHARP. So do we have different types of program? We got to make sure we have one program with one message, one clear message, and that's something we got to look into. Who's doing a great job? So not just the Army, Air Force, Navy, but we also got to look at the posts. Make sure with SHARP posts are doing the right thing, and constantly training and quality assurance. So I just want to give you a quick rundown of what I saw, or what we saw from that report. Again, I encourage you, just don't take my word for it, but go and check on the link that I have for when it comes to all the what was said. But it's about a little more than an hour. And if you really care about the soldiers, then you'll definitely take the time out to listen to this. And also look at the report, the 136-page report. My last takeaway I want to bring out is that we got to take care of survivors. I didn't hear much about, and it wasn't part of the charter, about the mental health. What is being done about the mental health about those survivors? They're going through so much stress, anxieties, and fear and stuff. What are we doing? I would like to have seen that mentioned in one of the 70 recommendations. I didn't see it. If I missed it, please let me know. But I think we ought to also take a look at what are we doing to these brave women and men who come out and say, hey, I've been harassed or I've been assaulted. How are we taking care of them? How are we taking care of their families is an important thing that we need to keep on to. So that's all I have right here. I'm Tony Williams from Veterans Council of Veterans. Please, and I encourage you to look at the report and keep spreading the word and change that culture. Until then, it's Tony Williams.